What's the point of the JCPOA? Following its Tuesday meeting, the UN Security Council remained deeply divided over how to deal with Iran's nuclear program. Fundamentally disagreeing on Tehran's right to enrich uranium as well as the validity of the 2015 nuclear deal. Is the UN still equipped to manage nuclear proliferation? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is Iran's nuclear program. For decades now, the issue of Iran's nuclear program has challenged the international community. And that was clear again on Tuesday as U.S., Iranian, Russian, and French representatives sparred over what action, if any, should be taken over Tehran's program. As a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran has long pledged to use its nuclear capacity for peaceful purposes only. But a fundamental lack of trust, a derailed nuclear accord, and June's 12-day war led by the U.S. and Israel has the UN Security Council struggling to find a way forward. Here's a look.
The UN Security Council is once again divided over Iran's nuclear program. Diplomacy is being tested and the space for compromise appears narrower than ever. Meeting on December the 23rd, Council members clashed over whether Iran's nuclear stockpile still falls under UN authority and whether further sanctions should be imposed. Senior UN officials say that intensified diplomatic efforts throughout 2025 have failed to produce a breakthrough. And the Council itself remains split, with Iran, Russia and China rejecting the legality of the process altogether.
You failed miserably in your so-called diplomatic efforts to strike a deal on the nuclear issue with Iran, and you know it.
Tehran argues that the 2015 nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, has expired, leaving the Security Council without any mandate to discuss Iran's program. Iran's ambassador pushed back hard against Western demands, particularly the call for zero uranium enrichment.
Insisting on zero enrichment policy is contrary to our rights as a member of the NPT, and it means that they are not pursuing the fair negotiation. They want to dictate their predetermined intention on Iran. Iran will not bow down to any pressure and intimidation, and we are not going to blackmail to the body in international field.
Washington, however, is drawing a hard line. Any return to talks, it says, comes with a non-negotiable condition.
There can be no enrichment inside of Iran, and that remains our principle. I've worked for President Trump in 2 administrations now, and I can tell you, in both administrations, President Trump extended the hand of diplomacy to Iran. But instead of taking that hand of diplomacy, you continue to put your hand in the fire. Step away from the fire, sir, and take President Trump's hand of diplomacy. It's extended to you.
This diplomatic standoff follows a dramatic shift on the ground. In June, a 12-day war between Israel and Iran ended with Israeli and American strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, including the use of US bunker buster bombs against hardened facilities. The attacks inflicted serious damage, but key questions remain over what survived and over the fate of Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Since July, Iran has suspended cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, sharply limiting inspectors' access to its nuclear facilities. That move has deepened concerns among Western governments, while Tehran insists it is not seeking a nuclear weapon and remains open to verification under its own terms. While the issue is argued at the UN in legal terms, reactions elsewhere have been far more direct. Israel, which has already struck Iran's nuclear sites, makes clear that patience is not part of its approach.
The idea of continuing to develop a nuclear bomb still beats in their hearts. We bear responsibility to ensure that the nuclear project, which has been gravely damaged in close cooperation with the Americans, will never be activated.
With inspections limited and trust eroded, the chances of a new agreement appear slim. though not entirely closed. But after airstrikes and years of mistrust, the path to any deal is narrower and harder to see.
So is there any clear path forward for the international community regarding Iran's nuclear program? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Washington, Sergeant at Arms of the Maryland Republican Party and former U.S. Secret Service officer, Barry Donadio. From Tehran, Associate Professor at Tehran University's Faculty of World Studies, Fouad Izadi. And also from the U.S. Capitol, non-resident Senior Fellow in Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council, Thomas Warwick. Thanks all so much for being with me. Tom, I'll start with you. Should the United Nations Security Council even be discussing Iran's nuclear program anymore under the terms of the JCPOA, especially when key members insist the process is completely legally flawed?
Well, yes, and greetings to you and to your other guests and to your viewers. The Security Council has had the file of Iran's nuclear program for many years, and it is, in fact, under the snapback sanctions that were imposed as a result of Iran's failure to comply with its international obligations. It's entirely appropriate that it should be spoken of in the Security Council. We really are looking at a 2016 of two very divergent alternate paths. One is that this is resolved diplomatically through hard negotiations that would end Iran's nuclear program, its enrichment capability, but then also lead to a lifting of U.S. sanctions against Iran. But the other alternative is the one that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be bringing to President Trump in a week's time, which is that there are further strikes to degrade Iran's missile and nuclear programs. So this literally is a fork in the road between peace and war, but those are the only two paths open.
Okay, Fouad, would you agree that there are just simply two very difficult choices now left to make for Iran?
Iran has made its choice. Iran is a member of the non-proliferation treaty, and under that treaty, Iran gets to enrich uranium. What the Americans are saying is they want to take that right away from Iran, and Iran is not going to accept that. And Iran is not going to be surprised again with a new attack. Last time, Iran was surprised because the other side attacked Iran in the middle of negotiations. This time, there is not going to be any surprises. Last time, it was the Israelis that asked for the ceasefire. This time, Iran meant if Iran is attacked, Iran may continue and don't pay attention to the request of a ceasefire by the Israelis. So the situation has changed. This is December. Iran was attacked in June. Iran has learned a lot of lessons, and Iran is not going to be pushed around. And if you don't believe me, you can look at the damage that Iran did to Tel Aviv and Haifa last time.
Okay, let me ask Barry, what you make of both analyses there, and to answer as well if you think Iran is at least correct to say that it is unacceptable to make demands of zero enrichment on Iran when under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty it has the right to do so.
Thanks for having me. And I do agree with both of your speakers. They made some very valid points. The United States is making a demand of no enrichment because it is only Iran that is threatening to wipe Israel off the map, and we can't forget that. So they can go forward and just simply allow inspectors and to make sure that they're not enriching uranium for any kind of warlike reasons. But ultimately, this is a good negotiation at the table. It should be talked at the UN because it's not fighting. We're talking. And when sides are talking instead of fighting, that is a good thing. So I think it's wonderful. They need to continue to do it. And the Trump administration is top prioritizing this to keep peace in the Middle East, to keep peace in Gaza, to keep peace in Israel and the entire region. So I recommend both sides continue talking, and it is a praised action, I think, that may yield results if Iran participates.
Okay, Fouad, I mean, I guess it's fair to say that a different standard is being applied to Iran then because of the threats that Iran has made. as Barry cited, it has said before that it wants to wipe Israel off the map. Israel will not forget that, neither will the United States, especially under this administration. And now the U.S. says it has extended the diplomatic hand to Iran. Please accept that hand. So would it make sense for Iran to sit down for direct talks with the U.S., even if you think they're futile, just to show willingness? So even if it leads to nothing, would the effort at least make a difference?
You know, Iran, for the last 30 years at least, has been saying that what we saw in South Africa needs to be repeated in occupied Palestine. People need to get a vote. Iran has the one-state solution. Palestinians should be able to vote, and if they do that, Netanyahu will not be the Israeli prime minister. You will have an equivalent of Nelson Mandela, a Palestinian that will take over Palestine if Palestinians get the chance to vote in their own country.
Okay, but that,
So
again, the U.S. sees this as, you know, fine, you can argue that a different standard is being applied and you can say it's not fair if this, you know, something fair isn't applied to the Palestinian case. But again, Iran is held in a separate league altogether because of the threats that it has made. So would you at least concede maybe just sitting down for direct talks with the U.S.? You can argue these cases one-on-one or you know, in bilateral discussions with the U.S., what you're saying now. But would it not make sense for Iran to just try to sit down?
I was talking about the idea of Iran wiping Israel out. I was saying that Iran is asking for a one-man, one-vote solution to the situation in Palestine. And so Israel will wipe itself out because they have genocidal leaders like Netanyahu. That leader will end up having Israel destroyed because of his policies and because of the blank check he gets from Washington. So that's with regard to wiping Israel out. With regard to negotiations, Iran was in the middle of negotiations. President Trump called his attack on Iran midnight hammer. So he took that hammer, he smashed the negotiating table, and Iran is willing to go back to negotiations. But what the Americans are saying is that you determine the end results of negotiations before negotiations start. And that is not negotiations. That's a joke, and we are not ready to laugh.
So, Tom, I mean, the question then again goes back to whether or not the process is even legal at this point. Is the snapback process even legal? And can any diplomatic progress really be made with President Trump at the helm right now?
Well, so the snapback provisions, it should be remembered, come out of a Chapter 7 United Nations Security Council resolution. So by the definition of the UN Charter, it is legal under international law. That's a settled question. The real challenge is that Iran wants to be able to keep the possibility of building a nuclear weapon at some point in the future. And President Trump is determined that the negotiations need to close that permanently. The issue is not that Iran should give up its right to enrichment. It's that both the United States and Iran should each realize that they have the right to take certain actions, but they choose not to exercise their rights. This is, after all, the entire basis of the international system. It's why treaties exist. Every treaty that makes a commitment to an opposing side recognizes that you're giving up a right in order to get a benefit. In this case, what President Trump is saying is that the United States has the right to impose sanctions, Iran has the right to enrich, but both countries agree to give up those rights in order to obtain certain benefits. The benefit for Iran is the lifting of worldwide economic sanctions against it because of its threats to the state of Israel. And the benefit to the United States is obviously that the nuclear threat from Iran would be forever lifted from the region. So this would be a good deal for everybody. And it would acknowledge that each side gets something that they very much want. And that is the heart of how international diplomacy can work.
Okay, let me ask Barry. I mean, we're hearing the rationale for why the U.S. feels They're on completely legal ground here, according to UN resolutions that are have already been adapted, or accepted. So I guess there's another segment here that has to do with the EU and whether the EU could have or should still forge its own path somehow with Iran, because Russia seems to think, for example, it's the EU partners that have failed so miserably. So is there another tact, or do they have to work, the EU and the US, still hand in hand, even though the US broke the 2015 agreement?
I think any talks whatsoever is positive, whether it's the UN, the EU, the United States. But you've heard our envoy say right at the United Nations, offering a hand of peace to the Iranian regime. Come to us, take Trump's hand in peace. We're willing to have direct talks with Iran, not publicly, like our envoy said. So this is an opportunity for Iran to do that. There should be nothing to hide. There should be no reason why the Iranian regime will not meet us directly and talk peace and prosperity in the Middle East. However, my other colleague there in Iran spoke of us smashing the negotiation table. The only thing that was smashed was Iran's nuclear program. That's what was smashed. The peace negotiations were not smashed. We're still in full accordance with everything that was agreed with.
But Barry, do you believe Iran at all has a right to a nuclear program?
I think personally, I think they have a right to enrich peacefully, but they agreed to have inspectors oversee that, and they're not letting that happen. And because of their past threats, and I speak nothing of the Iranian people. We love the people of Iran and in the entire region. It is the current regime that is the issue. That regime has threatened to nuke another country, to wipe Israel off the map. That's just something that can't be ignored. I don't think if anybody did that to any country, it just cannot be ignored. So they have put themselves in that situation. So I think the United States and Iran, they should come to the table, direct talks, and that could bring very, very fruitful future to both countries and to the entire region.
Okay. Fawad, I realize we have two U.S.-based opinions here, but we can't forget that not just Russia, China actually also called on the United States to clearly commit not to use force against Iran and take the initiative to resume the negotiations. But the issue of force does hang over. I know Iran feels that that was illegally, again, another illegal move, illegally employed against Iran with no negotiation there. So, it feels Iran is constantly, according to its arguments, not going to win because, as Iran says, the U.S. gets to kind of have it both ways.
There is nothing legal about what the United States does, especially during the Trump administration. Attacking Iran was illegal under international law. There was no UN resolution giving United States the right or the responsibility to attack Iran. Sanctioning Iran, the sanctions that Iran is suffering from are American sanctions. It is illegal under international law to force companies of other countries to submit to U.S. Congress's wishes. That if we have a Turkish company that wants to trade with Iran, they should submit to Turkish government restrictions, not American government restrictions. They are violating the rights of Turkish companies to engage in trade that may be beneficial for that Turkish company. So whatever we have talked about up to today in this program, when it comes to the United States, what they do is illegal. They don't care about international law. They have engaged in a genocide in Palestine. And the only language they understand is the language of force. And unfortunately, that is what they are going to get if they attack Iran next time.
Tom, broadly now, how negatively does the lack of agreement over Iran affect efforts for nuclear non-proliferation worldwide?
Well, I'm struck, Andrea, by the irony of Dr. Fuad's statement, because the view in the United States is that Iran only understands the logic of military force. And this is why President Trump ordered the strikes that he did last June. And so we are looking at a situation where, although the hand of diplomacy has been extended by Washington, Tehran chooses not to accept that. And the fear, as we look at the prospects for peace in 2026, is that we will end up with only military force being what's used. That's nobody's preference, but it is where we seem to be headed if Tehran refuses to enter into substantive, serious negotiations that would see an end to its nuclear program and end to enrichment in return for an end to U.S. and international sanctions.
Tom, you don't fear, though, I think we've discussed this before, that that is just, license to start war over a perceived threat, not too dissimilar to weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Go ahead.
No, this is not a perceived threat. This is an actual threat. Certainly, the reconstruction of Iran's missile capabilities is recognized not just in Israel, but if you look at the other countries that Iran has attacked its territory with missiles, it includes Saudi Arabia, it includes Qatar, it includes Iraq. And the targets in many cases have included other countries' nationals as well. So this is very much seen as a serious danger. The world takes Iran's threats to destroy Israel quite seriously.
Fouad, I can see you shaking your head.
It's very unfortunate. I ask your viewers to look at the Washington Post report last week. The negotiations that the United States engaged in Washington Post's wording, was a deception operation. And it would be foolish for any Iranian leader to want to fall for another deception operation. This is not negotiations. You don't determine the results of negotiations before negotiations start. This is a propaganda talking point. So if they decide to attack Iran again, they would say we offered to negotiate with Iran. Nobody is accepting that type of language because we have read American history. We know what Americans are all about. The only language they understand, unfortunately, is the language of force. Iran is not going to be surprised again. You're going to have thousands of American soldiers. You have about 50,000 American soldiers in this part of the world. Many of them will be killed if they attack Iran. This is the decision that the Iranian government has made, as far as I know. And I hope they stay away from that because those are young people with young families. It would be sad for them to die at that age.
Barry, I think we're hearing the description of the worst case scenario, really, if this process fails. So how close are we to seeing then the worst case scenario here?
Well, that's a question for the Ayatollah and the Iranian regime, and they have a choice. Like I've said earlier, they have to come to the table. Why not? What have they got to lose? Absolutely nothing. And if that's what Iran has in store for us, maybe they could have mercy on us and come to the table, come to the negotiation table, seek peace with the United States. If any administration can do it, it will be the Trump administration that can pull this off. Look what he's done for peace already around the world. So let's break the paradigm. Let's try something new between the Iranian regime and the United States. And our envoy is calling for direct talks with Iran. Why not? And besides, the Iranian regime has full military drills going on right now. So make no mistake about it, they're prepared. And they may even be on the offensive right now. Who knows? But we can stop it.
Yeah, Fouad, go ahead. I mean, I have to say, Barry, you're commenting on that this is an administration that wants to bring peace, but when we look at what's happening with Venezuela, for example, it's scaring people. So it's a bit hard for Iran to buy your phrasing there if the action we're seeing taken by the U.S. against a country that's not militarily threatening the U.S. at all, it runs contrary to your argument. Fouad, go ahead.
Venezuela has the same problem that Iran has. They have a lot of oil. That's what Trump wants. Trump wants oil. Trump wants Iranian oil. He wants to go back to the time of Shah when Americans could take whatever Iranian oil they wanted to take. And they are going back to 19th century. The only problem is that we are in 21st century. So gunboat diplomacy is not going to work. It's not going to work. Threatening other countries is not going to work. They want to limit Iran's ballistic missiles as well. So what the Americans are telling Iran is, you tell us where we need to hit next by giving us information about your program. And then they say that you shouldn't be able to respond to our attacks by limiting your ballistic missile program. They want Iran's ballistic missiles to have the maximum range of 300 kilometers. That means next time Iran wants to defend itself, instead of being able to hit Tel Aviv and Haifa, the Iranian missiles would fall somewhere in Iraq. And that's not going to happen. These are very simple issues. I'm surprised that intelligent people sitting in Washington don't realize these very basic issues, that countries are going to be hitting back if they're hit. This is just a simple fact that I don't think you need to think about it too much to realize.
Okay, Fawad, that will have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with me, and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.